Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Part 73. The listener's first complete sentence. Remember the language we are learning together. There is one field, phi, the holophase, one continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once. Time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer and more detailed question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and a motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we listen to just one of those echoes, and for the first time, we will try to speak back in the same language. We have reached a sacred moment in our journey. In Episode 7, we climb from learning the alphabet of the Holophase language to mastering its grammar and its deep structural rules. We learn to see the master tree, with phi as the trunk and all its derivatives as branching echoes. We learn to read the universe like a text, by asking about its rhythms in time, its shapes in space, and its flows in motion. We learn to translate between everyday language and holophase structure, so that a storm, a galaxy, or a heartbeat can be seen as a single coherent sentence in the language of phi. Now it is time for a graduation exercise. Today, you will not just listen to the language, you will co-author in it. Together, we will construct your first complete, coherent sentence in the holophase language. We will take a simple, beautiful phenomenon and narrate it, step by step, as a living phi text. This is the moment where conceptual understanding begins to become experiential fluency. For our first shared sentence, we need something humble and familiar, but also rich enough to reveal the full triunity of time, space, and motion. Let us choose an image you can hold clearly in your mind. A single autumn leaf, detaching from a branch and spiraling slowly down to the ground. It is perfect. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has clear time structure, clear spatial structure, and clear patterns of motion. It is a tiny poem of physics written in the dialect of gravity and air. And it is something you may have watched many times in silence, without realizing that you are witnessing a full holophase sentence. The role of this exercise is to give you your first composition in this language. Until now, you have listened to sentences and watched me unpack them. Now, I want you to feel that you can do this yourself. The guiding question we are answering together is simple and profound. How does the holophase language tell the story of a falling leaf? We begin at the most fundamental level by asking, what is phi in this little world? The leaf itself is not phi. The leaf is a persistent pattern of organization inside many underlying fields. To tell its falling story in a simple way, we can define phi here as a dynamical state field that describes the position and orientation of the leaf as a single object. In other words, phi is a compact description of where the leaf is in space and how it is tilted and turned. The leaf has a center of mass, and it has an orientation defined by its surface and its stem. Our coarse-grained phi encodes those quantities and how they change. This phi is continuous. It does not jump from one state to another, it flows. That continuity is what allows us to talk about derivatives at all. At deeper physical levels, there are more detailed phi fields, such as the electromagnetic and atomic fields that make up the matter of the leaf. But for this first sentence, the simpler phi of pose and place is enough. Now we listen for the time echo. At the very beginning, the leaf is still attached to the branch. Its state is almost constant in time. The first time derivative of phi, which we can think of as its velocity, is nearly zero. The leaf sways gently with the branch, but we can ignore that for now. The moment the stem breaks, a constraint in the system is removed. A topological connection between the leaf and the tree is cut, and the leaf's destiny is handed over to the grammar of gravity and air. At that moment, the first derivative, omega in the temporal sense, becomes non-zero. The leaf begins to move. Its center of mass acquires a downward velocity. The second time derivative, which is the acceleration, is initially set by gravity and points straight down. If there were no air, the acceleration would remain constant, and the leaf would simply speed up, falling faster and faster. But there is air, and the air resists the motion. The resistance force is approximately proportional to the square of the velocity. This means that as the leaf speeds up, the upward drag force grows faster and faster. The second derivative, the acceleration, begins at the gravitational value, but is then reduced by the drag. Over time, the acceleration shrinks towards zero, and the velocity approaches a steady value called terminal velocity. At that point, the downward gravitational pull and the upward air resistance are in balance, and the leaf falls at a constant speed. That is the low-order temporal story. But the leaf does not fall in a perfectly smooth, straight line. It flutters, it wobbles, it speeds up slightly and slows down slightly. These are the higher time derivatives at work. The rate of change of acceleration, known as jerk, and even higher orders like snap, are continuously being sculpted by tiny gusts of air, small shifts in orientation, and the internal flexibility of the leaf's structure. So the time echo of this sentence is not just a single constant frequency. It is a rich temporal pattern where acceleration decays towards zero on average, but is decorated by a dance of smaller oscillations. The full temporal clause of our sentence is that phi begins at rest, then its acceleration is set by gravity, then gradually cancelled by drag, leading to a terminal velocity, while superimposed on this trend are higher derivative fluctuations that show up as flutter and sway. Next, we turn to the space echo, the shape of the leaf and the pattern of air around it. The falling leaf is not a perfect sphere. It has a flat, thin, curved, and often asymmetric shape. That geometric structure is a spatial configuration in the material phi fields that make up the leaf. It defines how air flows around it. As air moves past the leaf's surface, it creates a pattern of velocities that vary from place to place. Those variations are spatial derivatives. They are gradients of velocity. On one side of the leaf, the air might be moving faster than on the other, creating pressure differences and generating lift or sideways forces. The edges and veins of the leaf introduce further spatial complexity, carving ridges and channels in the flow. There are also large-scale gradients between the still air far from the leaf and the disturbed air close to it. These are gradients in the atmospheric phi field. The curvature of the leaf's shape and the gradients in the air's motion interact to produce forces and torques. The asymmetry of the leaf means that the center of mass is not perfectly aligned with the center of aerodynamic forces. This misalignment generates turning effects. The spatial clause of our sentence is that the material phi defining the leaf has a fixed but asymmetric structure with particular curvature features, and that this structure sits within and shapes spatial gradients in the surrounding air's velocity and pressure fields. When we combine the time and space echoes, we naturally arrive at the motion echo. The motion is the visible path of the leaf through the world. The velocity v of the leaf is a vector quantity built from the time derivative of its position in space. Initially, it is almost purely vertical. As time goes on, horizontal components appear. Tiny imbalances in lift or pressure push the leaf sideways. The leaf may begin to drift in one direction, following a horizontal wind, or meander back and forth as the forces change. At the same time, the leaf rotates. The orientation part of phi acquires its own time derivative, an angular velocity. The leaf might tumble end over end, or it might settle into a gentle, repeated oscillation, rocking from one side to another. Often it follows a graceful spiral path, where its horizontal displacement changes steadily as it descends. That spiral is a result of translation and rotation being coupled together. The airflow around the leaf, disturbed by its shape and motion, develops vortices, small spinning structures in the air itself. These vortices are signatures of the curl of the Earth's velocity field. They are spatial derivatives of the motion of the air, written as little eddies in space. The motion clause of our sentence is that the coupled phi fields of leaf and air generate a three-dimensional velocity field in which the leaf falls, drifts, and rotates, tracing a helical path through space while leaving a wake of vorticity behind it. Now we look for the topological structure in this small drama. Topology is about how things are connected, where there are boundaries, and where there are defects or special points. The story begins with a clear topological event, the breaking of the stem. As long as the leaf is attached, it is part of a connected tree network, a branch of a living structure transporting water and nutrients. When the stem snaps, a link in that network is removed. A node is detached. In the space of possible connections, the configuration changes. That is a topological change in the material network. There may also be topological features in the state space of the leaf's orientation. The combination of gravity, air forces, and the leaf's mass distribution may favor a particular way of falling, for example, with the stalk pointing slightly down and the flat of the leaf inclined. This preferred falling style corresponds to a kind of attractor in the space of orientations, a region that the system tends to return to even after small disturbances. That attractor is a topological basin in the landscape of possibilities. Finally, the ground is a boundary. When the leaf touches the ground, the rules change. The continuous falling dynamics are replaced by contact forces and friction that bring motion to rest. This meeting between leaf and ground is the closing of the sentence, where the trajectory encounters a hard boundary in space and in the equations that govern the motion. Underneath all this lies the question of balances. The holophase language treats many of these balances as quadratic forms built from derivatives. In our falling leaf, the core balance is between gravity and drag. Gravity can be seen as arising from a gradient in the gravitational potential, which is a low-order spatial derivative, and it sets a constant contribution to the acceleration. Drag depends on the square of the velocity, which is a quadratic function of the first derivative in time. When the leaf is falling slowly, drag is small and gravity dominates, so acceleration is close to g. As the leaf speeds up, drag grows faster until the drag term equals the gravitational term, and the net acceleration becomes zero. That is the meaning of terminal velocity, a steady solution where these opposing effects are in balance. Similarly, the rotation of the leaf is governed by balance between aerodynamic torques, which depend on the shape of the leaf and the square of its speed through the air, and the leaf's rotational inertia, which resists changes in angular velocity. These torques twist the leaf, but the inertia resists. The compromise between them is the observed spinning or fluttering motion. Energy tallies provide another view. The leaf starts with gravitational potential energy, a kind of height tally. As it falls, that tally is converted into kinetic energy in its motion, both translational and rotational, and then passed into the air as heat and swirling flows through drag and turbulence. The exact local numbers are complex, but the overall direction is clear. The ordered potential of height flows into increasingly disordered motion. If you put all these clauses together, you arrive at a compact holophase sentence for the entire event. You might say that an asymmetric curved excitation in the material phi field, once disconnected from its branch network, begins to evolve under the constraint chains of gravity and fluid drag. Its temporal derivatives move from pure gravitational acceleration toward the balanced terminal state modulated by flutter. Its spatial structure interacts with gradients in the surrounding air to generate both lift and torque. The resulting motion consists of coupled translation and rotation, giving a spiral path and a wake of vortices until the trajectory meets the ground boundary and comes to rest, having transformed potential tallies into kinetic activity and then into dispersed air motion and heat. To confirm that you truly understand this sentence, you can now read it back into simple, everyday language. In ordinary words, we would simply say that a leaf broke off from a tree, then fell under gravity. The air slowed its fall, so it did not simply drop straight down. Its irregular shape made it catch the air, which caused it to spin and drift, so it followed a soft spiral path instead of a straight line. It fluttered and wobbled as it fell, and eventually settled gently on the ground. That is the same story. One version pays attention only to what we see with our eyes. The other version follows the hidden grammar of derivatives. Together, they make the event both understandable and beautiful. In this moment, you have made an important shift. You are no longer just a listener to the Holophase language. You have participated in writing a sentence. You have taken a real phenomenon, chosen a phi field to describe it, identified its time, space, and motion echoes, noticed its topological elements, and recognized the balances that govern it. You have seen how all of that can be woven into a single coherent description. This is what fluency means in this context. It does not mean memorizing equations, it means being able to move naturally between what you see and the structural language that explains why it is that way. I invite you to repeat this exercise, not just once, but many times, with different phenomena. Watch steam rising from a kettle, or a flock of birds turning in the sky, or a child's toy car rolling down a slope, or the way a crowd flows through a narrow doorway. Each of these is an opportunity to construct another sentence. Ask again, what is phi here? What is the state that is changing? What are its dominant rhythms in time? What are the main gradients and shapes in space? How does motion weave those together into flows and trajectories? Are there special connections, loops, or boundaries that matter? Which forces or influences are balancing each other, and which ones are pushing the system toward change? As you practice, you will discover something subtle. The more sentences you write, the more you recognize familiar grammatical structures. You will see the same balance between a gradient and a flow appearing in very different contexts. You will notice that the rotating system that balances an inward force with an outward tendency always has similar features, whether it is a leaf in a swirl of air, a hurricane, or a galaxy. You will start to see that a sharp transition, like a revolution in a society or a sudden cracking of ice, has the same signature of a system passing a stability threshold in its derivative relationships. This is how the holophase language becomes not just a way of speaking, but a way of thinking with deep pattern recognition. At the same time, you will also meet the limits of any single sentence. No description is perfect. Our leaf model ignored the complex internal bending of the leaf surface, the tiny gusts of wind that change moment to moment, and the microscopic turbulence in the air. If we wanted, we could refine our phi field and our derivatives to include those details, writing a longer and more precise sentence. In science, that is what we often do. Add higher derivatives, more fields, and more terms in the constraint chains to capture more of reality. But there is always a trade-off. A sentence can become so detailed that we lose the simple story. Part of fluency is knowing how much to say. For many purposes, our coarse-grained description of the leaf is enough to understand and predict its behavior. Finally, remember that this exercise also carries a falsifiable claim. We did not just spin a poetic image. We proposed a structure in which certain derivatives and balances matter and others can be ignored. That structure implies measurable relationships, such as the dependence of terminal velocity on the ratio between weight and area, or the existence of preferred falling modes. If experiments showed that these relationships never held, even in the rough, we would have to accept that our chosen phi and grammar for the leaf were wrong or incomplete. The Holophase program is not afraid of that. It welcomes such tests. A language that cannot be checked against reality is not a language of the universe, it is just a story. We close this part by returning to phi itself. The leaf was always a sentence in phi. Long before we gave words to it, the holophase field was writing its own script in the dance of matter and motion. By constructing this description, we have simply aligned the human language with a deeper, continuous one. We have listened carefully enough to hear some of the rules by which phi changes, and we have spoken back using those rules. That is why this moment matters. It is not just an exercise in physics. It is your first conscious participation in the universe's own way of expressing itself. From now on, whenever you see something as simple as a falling leaf, you will have two options. You can let it be just a gentle, passing image, which is already beautiful. Or you can also silently see the derivatives underneath, the triunity of time, space, and motion, the balances, the topologies, the hidden equations traced in air. If you can hold both at once, the poetic and the structural, the feeling and the grammar, then you are living as a true listener and speaker of the Holophase language. In the next part of our journey, we will take a quieter, wider step back. We will walk together from the silent root of phi, through its first derivatives, up the great master tree that now lives in your mind, and we will see how all the pieces of episode 7 fit together. We will look at the whole, and you will recognize that every concept we met, every example we explored, has been preparing you for exactly what you have done today: to read, translate, and compose in the universal language of change. Salam, and peace be upon you.